Well, I lecture in a first year subject, ED 1481, Foundations of Educational Psychology. And in particular, I lecture in two modes. So we have an internal cohort of students, about 100, 120, but the same subject is also engaged with by our external students. So we have about 60 or 70 of them. So it's quite a challenge in terms of how we have a single learning platform to meet quite different learners. In terms of the structure of the subject and how we actually do that, we have a Learn JCU site, and that's essentially the main platform that all students will engage with subject materials on. For the internal students, there's a 2-hour lecture, and for the external students, there's a vodcast that helps interpret that lecture, and external students can open that vodcast up online. And the idea of the vodcast is that it provides sort of 20 to 25 minutes, a summary and overview of the key topics for the week, the focus questions, some of the key themes that come out of the common textbook reading that all students, internal or external, will have for the 13 weeks of the subject. The textbook itself also has an accompanying website. So really the delivery of the subject is between the internal 2-hour lecture, the equivalent vodcast for external students, which is basically a PowerPoint presentation that the lecturer speaks to, and the textbook reading and the textbook website as well. We also set up a discussion board on the actual Learn JCU site, and the purpose of the discussion board is that week by week, the external students in particular can get onto a space where they can interact with their peers around the subject, topic and content. And finally, also to facilitate that interaction for the external students, in what can often be quite an alienating, disorientating experience of online study, we have Collaborate sessions. And the Collaborate software, it provides a space in real time for students in diverse locations across Australia, where our students are, to come onto a single platform, to engage with each other in conversation, to ask questions of their lecturer or their tutor, and to really engage in more substantive dialogue around the weekly topic. Some of the challenges as a first year subject, many first year students experience barriers to learning through just purely accessing technology and navigating their way around a new website. So as a first year subject, we have a very sort of simplified approach to navigation. So for example, students can click on a single button that says Introduction, and then the introduction will take them into the top 10 things to know about the subject. We also have a button that links to subject materials, and students can systematically and visually see the breakdown of the 13 weeks of content, and that content might have an icon that's associated with it. So students will know that week 2 is about physical development, week 10 is about motivation, week 8 is about neuropsychology and brain-based learning. And I guess my approach to teaching and learning is that students will see, yes, the discrete week by week separations of topics, but they'll also see how those topics fit together as pieces of the puzzle that is educational psychology. And that each week they'll be challenged to ask themselves, how does this week's piece of the puzzle fit into the subject, but how does that subject fit into a Bachelor of Education, and ultimately, why is this topic in a subject, in a degree that's preparing me to be a teacher? And that's what we hope first year students will ask themselves when they engage in the subject itself. Many of the difficulties that first year students experience in transition to university are related to their academic literacy. So for many students, especially first in family students, it's such a challenge coming into an academic space and being expected to read, to write, to communicate using the conventions of academic language or discourse. And it's not that the ways of knowing and communicating that these students bring into the course should be devalued. On the contrary, we try to value their ways of speaking. We try to value the knowledge that they bring into our subjects, so that teaching and learning is a two-way process. But we really have to scaffold, I guess, put some stepping stones in place for the transition into academic ways of knowing and approaching knowledge and discussing knowledge. So some of the ways that we do that, for example, the subject is broken into a 2-hour lecture. That's a fairly traditional lecture format and a 1-hour tutorial. But I really try to be innovative, I guess, in that 2-hour lecture. So yes, it is a big lecture theatre with 150 students sitting in rows, but while that space is a space for the delivery of content, it's also a space, I hope, for students to discover content. So it's an interactive space as well. So we have discussions. I learn about students' lives. They talk about the concepts. They relate them to their life experience. They bring their life experience into the lecture theatre, and hopefully it becomes alive, and it's not just a sage on the stage, teacher-centred approach to learning and teaching. But we do that in a way that still has structure that many first-year students need. It still has explicit content and teaching and conceptual language that we really encourage students to engage with. And then we move into, finally, the tutorial setting. And in the tutorial setting, it's really an opportunity to apply the concepts and the theoretical content that students have engaged with in the lecture and the reading. So in that tutorial space, it's where theory meets practice. It's where abstract theoretical content meets very concrete, hopefully real and authentic context that our students will be teaching in, ultimately, in the local community.